Barbara Bolick. An avid lover of the outdoors, Barbara happened to go missing during one of her quick hiking trips. It all began when her husband's cousin and cousin's friend came to visit in Corvallis, Montana. On the morning of July 18th, 2007, the group planned to hike through Bear Creek Overlook in the Bitterroot Mountains. However, her husband and the cousin couldn't go, due to the latter being hungover. So it was just Barbara and the cousin's friend, Jim Ramaker. The two left at 9 a.m. and hiked for quite a bit. Throughout, Barbara would be steadily walking about 20 to 30 feet away from Jim. Around noon, Jim stopped at a scenic view, only to realize a few minutes later that Barbara was gone. A search would begin with no belongings of hers ever turning up. Not even her backpack, which reportedly contained a .357 Magnum pistol. Authorities did find one lead though. While on the trail, Jim and Barbara briefly talked with another group on the trail. Two young men and their black dog. And while the descriptions of what they look like are available, along with their vehicle, they have not yet been identified. It could be possible that they had a role in Barbara's disappearance, but they are not officially labeled as suspects. It might also be possible that she just got lost, but according to others, she knew the area very well.
Brandon Swanson. May 13th, 2008. Swanson just finished his first semester at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, so that night, he and some friends threw a party at their home, not only to celebrate but for a send-off to a departing friend. Quite a bit of drinking went on, with the 19-year-old Brandon reportedly having at least one shot of whiskey, possibly more, though it must be said that he didn't appear drunk. Shortly after midnight, he left and decided to drive 30 minutes over to his parents' house, from Canby to Marshall. At 1:15 a.m., Brandon got his car stuck in a ditch and attempted to call his friends for help, but for a while, nobody picked up. So in a last-ditch attempt, he called his parents. Brandon didn't know where exactly he was, so gave the best description he could. Once both his parents, Brian and Annette, reached the mentioned location, nobody was there. So, they tried calling again in order to pinpoint a better location. This call lasted for 47 minutes, with Brandon saying he saw lights coming from the nearby town of Lind. The call abruptly ended with him suddenly screaming, "Oh shit." They tried calling back, but kept being sent back to voicemail. The next day at noon, his car was found in the ditch, but no Brandon. Another interesting thing to note is that the light he saw might not have been from Lind. It was either from another town or another strange source. Most theorize that he fell into a river and suffered through hypothermia, had a mental breakdown, or planned to go missing. Some even crazier people think he got abducted by aliens due to the lights he saw, but that remains a weird theory to the case.
Florian Krüger. Most of the information from this case is written in German, so if there is a translation error, then that's why. But Florian was a 21-year-old German man who went missing in the early morning of November 26, 2011. At 10 p.m. that evening, he was seen performing music at a bowling center. Soon after, he then went to a gay bar called Dream Factory, where he met up with some friends. They talked for a short while before Florian said, "I'm tired, I'm going home." The thing was, he didn't plan on going home. Instead, he planned to go see his boyfriend, Kevin. It's speculated that around 1:30 a.m., Florian sat outside Kevin's home in his car, waiting. He messaged him, not getting an answer due to Kevin being at a dance, and a friend was actually the one who saw the messages. At 1:45, he drove his car to a bridge and parked it there. Now, most said he likely committed suicide, but there is some evidence to contrast this. His mother hired a dog trainer to have her canine sniff the scene, and from that, it seems he might have got off the bridge a different way, possibly being kidnapped. Also, Kevin reportedly said he saw Florian on a gay chat room just before 5 a.m., which complicates things. They reached out to the administrators of the site to get his IP address, but they said his account was blocked there. And over the years, many have come forward saying that they saw the young man. As early as December, a woman had spotted him in Duisburg with a dog, and later on saw him again. A big search effort was made in the town, with posters and flyers being printed, but he was still missing.
Asha Degree. What's strange about this case is that she vanished from her home on her own accord. It happened during the early mornings of Valentine's Day in the year 2000. The last known sighting of Asha was at 2:30 a.m. when her father went to check up on her and her brother, who slept in the same room together. 4 hours later, their mother went into the bedroom to wake the two kids up for school, and only her son was there. Asha was gone. Sometime during the night, she got out of bed, with her brother only assuming the noises were her shifting in bed. Immediately, the parents called the authorities, with a full search and investigation being conducted. 2 truck drivers spotted her around 3 and 4 a.m. before she vanished into the woods. All she carried was a black book bag and a black Tweety Bird purse, and whatever else was contained in those. During the initial search, Asha's pencil, marker, and Mickey Mouse hairbow were found by the doorway of a tool shed, which is right near the stretch of road she was seen by that February morning. The bag was covered in black plastic trash bags and found a whole 26 miles away from her home. And to make things creepier, a pair of men's khakis and some animal bones were found nearby. Apparently someone might have spotted her getting into a dark green, early 70s car. This isn't 100% confirmed, but many case summaries include this info. As to what motivated her to leave, her class had just read a book called The Whipping Boy by Sid Fleischman. It details a young royal servant running away and going on adventures, but it is noted that they return at the end. Could Asha have been motivated by this? We will never know.
Timmothy Pitzen. This young boy from Aurora, Illinois had a seemingly normal life. He was finishing his first school year and had 2 seemingly loving parents, Amy and James Pitzen. But things tragically went dark for the family, beginning on one normal day. It was May 11th, 2011, and Timothy was dropped off at Greenman Elementary School by his father. Yet at 8 a.m., his mother unexpectedly came and signed him out for the day. Her reason? An unspecified family emergency. 2 hours later, the duo arrived at an auto repair shop where Amy dropped off their car. An employee there drove the pair to the Brookfield Zoo, where they stayed for several hours. During this, James learned that the two were gone and filed missing persons reports. At 3 p.m., Amy retrieved the car and drove her and her son to the Key Lime Cove Resort in Girly, Illinois. They stayed the night there and woke up the next morning to drive to another hotel, the Kalahari Resort in Wisconsin Dells. They stayed the entire day, with security footage even showing them signing out. This would be the last time anyone ever saw Timothy. During that day, Amy would make several phone calls to family members, including her mother and brother-in-law, to say that they were alright and not in any harm. Timothy even seemed mostly fine, besides complaining in the background about how he was hungry. She failed to call her husband, however, and that night, Amy was spotted at a Family Dollar, buying stationery items. Timothy was not with her. She then went to a Sullivan's food store, then the Rockford Inn, where her life would end. Sometime that night, or the next morning, she took a dangerous amount of antihistamines and slit her wrist and neck, killing her. Amy's body was found in the afternoon of May 14th. The last thing she did before her death was writing a note and mailing 2 letters. They stated that Timothy was safe and is living with supposed people who care for him, but that he will never be found. Timothy has never been located, along with his bag, toys, clothes, and his mother's cell phone. That phone was found, though, 2 years later, but no new leads were given by it. Despite the detailed timeline and multitude of clues, we don't even know if he's still alive, and where the supposed caring people even are.
Lauren Dumolo. A pretty recent case from my home state of Florida. The last known video of Lauren before her disappearance was recorded on June 17, 2020, at a gas station. She is shown applying for a job there, being very talkative and cheerful with the clerk. The next morning at 6 a.m., Lauren's boyfriend Gabriel saw her before heading into work, letting her sleep in. Her phone attempted to FaceTime him later that morning, to which he didn't pick up. A maintenance worker at her complex had a conversation with her, due to being asked about any cheap apartments nearby. This was really odd, as just recently at that point, she had just paid her full rent. That night, Gabriel arrived home to notice her absence. He called her father and set up a missing persons report. Now what I find really interesting about this case is the lack of clues. No major witnesses besides those mentioned. 2 items of her were found though, Her black purse was found on June 19th at 4 Freedoms Park, a place she very frequently visited, and on July 2nd, her shirt was found by the sand by the waterline. That's it. She just vanished like that. It actually got a lot of attention in the community of Cape Coral, with flyers, signs, and a bike rally of all things.
Girly Hossencofft. Born and raised in Malaysia during the 1960s and 70s, Girly decided to visit America during the 1990s for vacation, and there her life would change forever. She met Diasian Hossencofft and would fall in love with him. So much so that the two would eventually get married in 1992, living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this Diasian fellow was one strange man. He was a con artist and professional nut who got kicked out of medical school after doctoring his transcripts. Diasian would falsely claim he was a surgeon and make money scamming cancer patients with pseudo-cures, and believed in many government-related conspiracy theories, along with other weird shit. His real name isn't even Diasian, it's Armin Chavez. Oh, and in 1996, he impregnated a Japanese woman from Canada, and raised the boy with Girly, saying he was adopted. And the family would always have a really rocky relationship, but the reveal that the boy was his biological son, along with the domestic violence incident, was too much for Girly. She moved out in January 1999, relocating to an apartment. During the divorce proceedings, Diasian reportedly threatened to kill her, which authorities would be aware of. And the last time Girly would be seen was September 9th, 1999, when she finished a shift at work at the local bank. She failed to arrive at work the next morning, and 10 minutes after her shift started, friends contacted authorities to file a missing persons report. Investigators found pools of blood at her apartment, along with several articles of clothing being found along the highway. So where was Diasian? Well, he started claiming that he was dying from leukemia, and was to travel the world in search of treatment. And he just so happened to leave for a flight to South Carolina the morning she disappeared, and weeks later would be apprehended by authorities on his suspicions. Him and his current partner, Linda Henning, went to trial for the murder, claiming some pretty bizarre things. First is the claim that a militia member named Bill Miller was the one who killed her, which Diasian allowed, and that this was a practice just before the climax with the alien New World Order. Oh, and he claimed to be a reptilian shapeshifter with superhuman abilities. Some other weird claims were made involving tampering with evidence, and that Girly's body had been cannibalized. But her body was never found. Nobody ever revealed the location of her body.
Maurice Jefferson. 16 years old at the time of his disappearance, this former choir boy and aspiring doctor actually has a small amount of information to his case. He lived in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and attended Dillard High School. On the night of November 30th, 1983, he left his home for basketball practice, and strangely enough, he left his wallet at home, with it lying on the television set. The only people who saw Maurice that night were two unidentified teenage girls, who claimed to see his disappearance right before their eyes. They told police that they saw two black men in their Oldsmobile approach Maurice while he was shooting hoops. They forced the boy into their car to never be seen again. But reportedly, another witness saw Maurice later that night, which only brings up more questions. Did the men just let him go? And did he know that this would happen, since he left his money and forms of identification at home?
Harold Holt. A disappearance you might have heard of due to how high profile it is. Harold began his political career in 1935, when he was elected to the federal seat of Fawkner. And after the retirement of Sir Robert Menzies in January 1966, he became the new Prime Minister of Australia and leader of the Liberal Party. And during his short stint in office, he became known for his pro-Vietnam War stance and support for the United States in that effort. But strangely, his stint as Prime Minister wouldn't even last 2 years, under some pretty unusual circumstances. On December 17th, 1967, Harold Holt and 4 friends went out to watch Alec Rose circumnavigate the Rip into Port Phillip Bay via his yacht. But the boat was barely visible, so the group left to drive back to Portsea. But at around noon, Harold suggested that they stop at Cheviot Beach, a place he had swam at many times before. The others would keep an eye on him as he enjoyed his time in the water. He swam deeper and deeper in, to the point that the others actually lost sight of him. He just vanished into the water. Now, you would have thought that he simply drowned, but his body was never located. So most likely he was dragged out to sea, with others believing some other crazy theories. The weirdest one being that Harold was actually abducted by a Soviet submarine.
Denise Beaudin. This woman is actually linked to a much larger case so massive it spans decades. She was last seen on November 26, 1981, with her boyfriend, Bob Evans. The two went to Thanksgiving dinner with her parents in Goffstown, New Hampshire. Less than a week later, on December 1st, Denise's parents decided to visit her, only to notice nobody was at her home. However, the two just assumed they quickly moved due to financial issues, and the fact that they lived with their 6-month-old daughter, Dawn, and as you may guess, nobody would ever see Denise again. But before diving into her case, we need to talk about this Bob fellow. It turns out that's not his real name. In fact, he's had several names, being born as Terence Petter Ramusin in 1943. After dropping out of high school during his sophomore year, he enlisted in the Navy and became an electrician on various naval bases. He would be discharged in 1967 and moved to Hawaii. There, he got married to an unknown woman and had 4 kids, with all 5 leaving him in 1973. He would briefly see them again sometime in the mid-70s. For the next few years, Terence assumed various identities and committed several murders, like those of Marlise Elizabeth Honeychurch and her daughters. Their bodies weren't even identified until 2019. He lived in New Hampshire throughout the early 80s, where he met another woman named Denise, who he is suspected of also murdering. Terence would move to Los Alamitos and Cypress, California. He used the identity of Curtis Mayo Kimball, which has been stolen from someone living in Texas. There, Terence lived with a 5-year-old girl named Lisa, which was actually Dawn, the biological daughter of Denise. He ended up leaving her with a married couple he knew, to which she would end up in foster care. In 1988, Terence was arrested for stealing a car and was also charged for the abandonment of Dawn. He only spent 3 years in prison, but luckily he was arrested again in 2003 after murdering his at-the-time partner, Inusun Jun. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, but died in 2010. Many of his other crimes would be linked to him throughout the years, but the exact whereabouts of Denise are unknown. It's pretty clear that Terence murdered her in some way, but the details are far from exact.
Amelia Hausia. Her disappearance happened the night she graduated from Lake Ginadera College on December 19th, 1992. She went to a party with her boyfriend, Ben Mayle, where the two were getting along, although an argument later that night officially ended their relationship, with Amelia returning home at around 3 in the morning. She got changed and wrote a note to her aunt stating that she was going for a walk to clear her head. A cousin of hers seemed to notice Amelia crossing Exhibition Park, thinking she was heading to a 7-Eleven. The last sighting of her was on December 22nd via CCTV at the Woden Plaza Shopping Centre in Canberra, Australia. Now, usually this is where the case ends, but months later, Kim, a relative, claimed to have received strange calls from who she thought was Amelia. The caller never made any noise, and in July of 1993, 6 months later, Amelia's biological mother claims to have gotten a call from her. She said that she was fine and planned to visit Tonga that Christmas. She didn't explain anything else, and she never did keep that promise. Although apparently other sightings have been made since then, but nothing viable.
Jared Negrete. And finally, we end on the case of a young, missing Boy Scout. The 12-year-old was on his first ever overnight camping trip in San Bernardino County, California. It was mid-July 1991, meaning it was pretty humid out, and the boys along with their scoutmaster trekking to the summit of Mount San Gorgonio. Jared became really tired at one point and began slowing down compared to the rest of his group. At about 1,000 feet from the summit, he most likely took the wrong path and went missing. During the search, footprints matching Jared's were found, which are said to have spanned nearly 16 miles. Some items of his were also found, including his backpack, some beef jerky, and candy wrappers. Most importantly was his camera, which contained several photos he took while lost. The final photo being a really eerie close-up of his face. It's likely he could have survived alone on the mountain for quite a while, since the amount of water within was sufficient. But for now, the potential disturbing whereabouts of Jared will continue to puzzle many.